Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast, where we serve and support leaders so you can serve and support your local church.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Olson. So we are on a countdown to the Overflow Worship Conference, and guys, it's only a month away. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, what are you waiting for? This conference is for worship leaders and the entire worship team, and we want to see you there. So please join us. We would absolutely love to get to know you. I'm really excited to introduce today's guest. So Brian Tabor, who is the founder of Worship Leader Probs, is here with me today, and I'm so excited to announce to everybody that he is hosting the 2022 Overflow Worship Conference. So if you're there, you're going to get to meet him and hear from him. Brian has a wealth of information and knowledge and experience and encouragement to give to worship leaders. And so I'm just so excited to have him as a guest on the podcast today. So welcome, Brian. Thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a great honor. Love the heart of what you're doing. And so honored to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, for those of you listening, if you're an Instagram person or social media person, you maybe know Brian as Worship Leader Probs on Instagram and Facebook and maybe other places too. Are you on TikTok?
I am sort of ashamed to say yes. I'm on TikTok. I don't know what I'm doing. And I'll preface that by anybody who goes and checks it out. You'll confirm that I don't know what I'm doing. But yes, we are on TikTok.
That's amazing. I was actually told by many people, like, Andrea, you should be on TikTok. And I was like, why? I don't know, but I did try it for a little bit. I think there is a niche for like some encouraging stuff too, but I just, I don't know. I tried it and I'm not sure that it worked. So I deleted the app from my phone. So if anybody finds me on TikTok, there's like two things. And then
it's like a wormhole, man. TikTok is like a wormhole that sucks you into,
Yes.
The whole thing.
Never ending. Yes. Well, Brian, would you kick us off and just tell everybody a little bit about you and the ministry that God has called you to?
Yeah. So I am a worship pastor. I'm in year 28.
Wow.
And so, worship pastor. I've been in Indiana my whole ministry, and I'm actually one of the weirdos that's been in the same city for his whole ministry.
Wow.
I've never moved for a ministry job. I've served 3 churches in Indianapolis. And so my current church, I'm 13 and a half years in, and it's a great group of people. I love my pastor. He's a wonderful guy. And I'm grateful for that. That I know that's probably not the case everywhere. That can be a little bit of a challenging relationship sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for that. And so about almost 6 years ago, I was walking through the church one Sunday, and some dear saint said something to me, and I don't remember what they said, but I do remember literally stopping in my tracks, and I just started laughing because I thought, I wonder how many people around, like in the US and around the world, how many people are hearing something like that today? And then I really started laughing because I thought, I bet there's a lot of them. And so I went, I was waiting to close the service that was going on. And I went back and I thought, it'd be really funny if I could start something just for me that was like therapy. It was like, I need a place to vent and get some of these things off of my chest and just put them out there. And if nothing else, it will be therapy for me. And that's really what it was for a very long time. Nobody noticed. And I didn't know anything about memes or Instagram or anything. And you will, if you go look at the early stuff, you will confirm that they're terrible. And it was mostly me, just like I would shove my phone in my wife, Kim, I'd shove it in her face and say, hey, is this funny? And after a couple of months, she would look at me just like with this confused look saying, you're still doing this. And so nobody noticed. I felt a little bit better. I was just getting some things off my chest. So I'll never forget two things. I'll never forget the first time I saw a comment from Paul Balash, And I was like, wait a second, does Paul Balash follow this account?
Yeah, like for
And
real?
he did. And I was like, what in the world? He was like my worship leading hero,
Yeah.
and then I can remember the moment where, and I was anonymous. Nobody knew it was me. Nobody
Yeah.
knew who ran the account or if it was a bunch of people or just one person or whatever. And so I started getting these private messages on Instagram from worship leaders, production leaders from around the country. And they were like, I need help. I've got people on my team that won't talk to each other, or I've got an affair happening on my team, or my senior pastor won't have anything to do with me.
Wow.
Like, what do I do? And so I went to Kim with that, and I was like, okay, now I'm getting these. And she goes, first of all, how that is kind of a sad commentary on the state of some people in ministry. Like, they're going to this anonymous internet account for advice. And then she goes, okay, now I understand. It would be just like God to take all these things that you love and roll them into one random, thing. And so that's us. Launched a podcast a couple of years ago, and I get to talk to amazing people like you. So we're having a lot of fun.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so cool. I love that. I love that your wife said that's just like God, because it is. It's like you didn't really see this coming. It was kind of one of those things that just happened, and then that it's the Lord, and that He's like, okay, I'm gonna use that.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I'm gonna use this unlikely scenario.
Random guy in Indiana. We're gonna do something there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just as a side note, you guys did this big identity reveal thing. That was fascinating to me, because I think I had just started following not terribly long, within the year. And so I was just fascinated, who's it going to be?
So it never was supposed to become a thing.
Yeah.
But I started getting a lot of questions like, who are you? Yeah. How do you know all this stuff about being a worship pastor?
Sure.
Are you following me around?
Yeah.
I'm just one of you. That's how.
Yes.
These are real life stories, so, yeah. So people were like, does your church know? Does your team know? Have you ever memed your team? And I was like, yes, I have many times. And they would come in late to rehearsal. Some of them knew. They would come in late or unprepared, and they would be like, don't meme me.
Yeah.
And so I finally said to somebody on Instagram, I was like, okay, this isn't going to go away. And I thought, okay, get us to 50,000 Instagram followers, and I'll tell you who I am. And I literally turned to Kim, and I was like, that's never going to happen. Yeah. I was like, I picked a number that's so safe. I'll never have to reveal who I am. And the followers kind of rallied and shared it with their teams and their friends and all that stuff. So we got there a couple of years ago, and yeah, we had a big reveal night, and there were people texting me on the side, it's you, isn't it? It's totally you.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So that kind of became a thing.
Yeah. Well, how fun though. What a fun cool little thing. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so cool. So you have been in ministry for a lot of years, like you said at the top. And so you've seen a lot and worked with a lot of different people, from seasoned to brand new, and probably everything in between. What are some of the current challenges that you see in worship ministry in the church? Just because you're not only in your church, but you're getting interaction through this amazing ministry that God has given you with so many people from probably all over the world. So what are some of the current challenges you're seeing?
I think, okay, so COVID, the shutdowns, all of that. So there are people that were affected, that lost loved ones and all of those things. So those are the people that we need to come alongside and pray for and all of that. And, but in the church world, we literally with the flip of a switch, we all became television producers, right? So we were told you can't gather. in most parts of the world. Like you can't have church. Who saw that coming?
Yeah.
I didn't. I certainly didn't. So we literally couldn't gather physically. So we're now essentially making TV shows. It happens to be a church service, but I don't know how many of your listeners had training in making TV shows.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't. And so,
None.
okay, overnight we're operating in a complete area that we have no training in, probably very little gifts in, like I don't really do great at like speaking production for a live experience, let alone like, okay, now there are cameras and all kinds of, and so we're trying to do completely different things to engage the audience. We're tapping into creative planning stuff that we've never done before. Yeah. And that was kind of frightening for me, at least frightening and challenging and all the things. I mean, I just remember having these Zoom meetings. I don't know how many Zoom meetings I had even been on before the lockdown happened. And now we're all, like over Zoomed, and so, okay. So then you fast forward and churches start meeting in person again. So now you're living in this tension of, okay, we've got people here, and yet there are people still watching online. How do you create an experience that engages those completely different, congregations, the people who are here? We know how to do that. We've been doing that for a long, long time, but it's these, it's living in that tension. And so I just think I can speak for me and the people that I'm talking to. Everyone just seems exhausted from all of that still. Yeah. And it would be amazing if we had the means to give like everyone a sabbatical. Can you imagine? Can you imagine like every worship and production leader gets a sabbatical? Yep. And then, we all maybe tag teamed and helped each other keep it going while they were away or whatever. I mean, that's kind of where we're at and kind of what we need. And, the people that as challenging as it was for us, we were already streaming online. So we definitely had to change some things and fine tune some things, but, we got hundreds of messages on Instagram saying that something like this, hey, we have not been online. My pastor said we need to be ready to start this weekend. What do we do? Wow. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, first of all, I'm not the guy to talk to about it because I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it's a fairly complex situation. So, man, that's a long answer, but I think it's just people are kind of tired and struggling because, elder boards and senior pastors, we've got people back now. Let's hit the gas and let's really rally, because churches are having to evaluate, who were we pre-COVID? Yep. Who were we during COVID, and who are we now? Yeah. And in many cases, it's a completely different church. Yep. So.
Yeah, totally. And that's a really hard thing to maybe accept. It's a hard thing to navigate, and it's a hard thing to know, like, how do we move forward from here as a completely different church, a completely different organization, or, a church. I've been hearing from a lot of people that like people are attending in person like 1.5 times a month or something like that. And so, they're like, wow, we're operating at, this much lower capacity. And so how do we encourage people to come back those who can, but also how do we still continue our online ministry and make it, engaging and all of that too. So it's just, like you said, it's a lot, it's a tall order. And I'm with you. I've talked to a lot of people who are just like, I've worked more in the last 2.5 years than I ever have in my life.
Well, and you could have taken a vacation, but where could you have gone?
Right.
You couldn't go any place, and so, and how do you catch up from that? Yeah, that's a tough assignment, man. Yeah. We've never been here before.
Before we get to the rest of today's episode, I just wanted to pause and remind you that if you have not gotten your tickets for the Overflow Worship Conference, we want to see you there. So grab your tickets today at overflowworship.com. Now, remember, it's only a month away. And so there's a couple of things that I just want to highlight for you before we get back to our episode. Number one, on October 7th, we kick it off with a night of worship with myself and Mark Harris and McKendry Tucker and Chris Clayton and just an incredible group of people excited to worship with you. And guess what, guys? That night is open to the public. So bring your friends, bring your neighbors, bring your mom, bring everybody, because we would love to worship together with you. And then Saturday the 8th continues with sessions and workshops for the entire worship team. So you might be wondering, what in the world do you mean by entire worship team? Well, I mean like sessions specifically for your sound techs that are created to help them address their specific pain points within the local church context. Or I mean sessions like learning how to use tracks like a pro, or maybe some vocal intensives. But you know what? You just won't know until you head to the website at overflowworship.com and you can see everything there and then click that little buy button and get tickets for you and your team. We really hope to see you there. All right, back to today's episode. It's oddly comforting that we're all in it together, but it's also like, does anybody have like anything? Like
Right.
someone.
Help a brother or sister out, please.
I know. Does anyone know something I don't? I would love it if you did. Yes. So, I mean, man, like what? Because your wife, you do ministry with your wife as well, right? Like she's a worship leader too.
Yes.
So what do you guys do to like try and, I mean, it's a different season to recover from, right? Because we've never done this before, but like, what are some things that you guys do to try to stay healthy as worship leaders, or trying to, maybe invest back in yourselves, even in the recent, 6 months after everything that we've been through?
Yeah, it's a challenge, man. And, this is going to sound like a Sunday school answer, and it is, but it's really this simple. I have a really good friend, Scott Longyear, who comes on. He's a senior pastor, but was a worship pastor in kind of a previous ministry. And he will always say, you have to do whatever you have to do to keep your fire hot. And so the Sunday school answer part of that is relationship with the Lord, your walk with the Lord, filling the well with the truth of his word. There's no substitute for that. Like there's no shortcut. Yeah. You can't take a pill and, fill up your spiritual tank. You have to keep doing that. Yeah. You have to do it every day. You have to get into a habit. I am a person. I'm not a reader. Okay. My wife has literally piles of books all over our house, and she's reading them all somehow simultaneously. And she goes, this really frustrates you, doesn't it? I'm like, well, I just don't understand. How can you follow all these, stories?
Yes.
And so, I'm not a reader. And so for me, it takes a lot of discipline to do that. And, even if it's not sitting down and opening it, I think that's, plan A, but, a B plan could be, the Bible on, there are Bible podcasts, there are, audio Bibles and things that you can get. Like, if you're a commuter, like I have been, you have a choice. What can you be filling your spirit with while you're commuting? Fill it with something good, So I think that's the first part. I think the second part is you have to be intentional about the other kinds of rest that you need. So you need, physical rest and replenishment. You need emotional, we're in creative fields. And so what we're doing there, it involves our emotion and the creative side that God wired us to have. And so you've got to find what does that look like for you? And so, for us, we love to travel, and, there was a couple of years where that wasn't possible. So we would try to go on walks. We would try to go to parks. We would do things outside, and we didn't win the battle every single day either, by the way. But we we did come up with some things that were helpful for us. We love to be outside, so we would do some of that. We have we got a puppy. Probably a lot of people did that,
Yeah.
So we're potty training and all of the joys of coming with puppy with the promise of that all going well at some point. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you have to be intentional about it because like I'm in a great church. I have a great pastor, but his role in our organization is probably not going to be the guy who knocks on your door and just comes in and sits down and says, "Hey man, I was thinking about you this morning. How are you doing?"
Yeah.
If you're in a church where that happens, soak up every moment of it, because not everyone lives in that world. So you have to take charge of that. If you need some time, you have to take control of that. Go to your leadership, go to your pastor, go to your board, whoever you have to go to, and just say, look, you can do without me for a couple of weeks, or you can do without me forever. I need some time to fill the tank.
Yeah.
So I can come back and let's hit the ground running for this next season. But yeah, you got to be intentional about it, because nobody can do that for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes we don't realize that, just like our decisions to like progress in our craft or, that kind of thing, those have a cumulative impact. Well, what you're talking about also has a cumulative impact, either positive or negative. And if we continue to ignore it, that's a recipe for burnout, a recipe for
Absolutely.
just, getting to the point where you're like, I'm done forever. Like, I don't ever want to do this anymore. And of course, that's what the enemy wants. And so that's what we need to do, is to combat it. I think, you're so right. Just being intentional to figure out what needs to be done, what to do. And it's interesting because I don't know if you hear this, but I hear it and I felt it. I was a volunteer worship leader for 15 years. And it's like, I felt like I was letting them down, or like, I don't want to leave them high and dry. I don't want to make it more difficult for them because I need a month off, and that's like well-meaning at the core, but it's also not a great way to operate. Do you hear that a lot too, that's kind of a reason why people don't want to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just messaging back and forth with a young worship leader about a week ago she's at a campus, like her church started a campus, and she is literally the only musician there. And she was asking for some advice, like, I desperately need a break. What do I do? Because I'm the only one. What are they going to do if I'm gone? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what I kind of said, what I said earlier to her is like, here's the choice really is, do they kind of keep you in the saddle until you burn out and then you're gone forever?
Yeah.
Or do they figure out a way to make it work for a couple of weeks? And maybe that's somebody who can come from another campus.
Yeah.
Maybe that is, this is obviously not ideal, but there are churches that will play, YouTube worship videos from other churches. I mean, there are lots of options out there if that's the case, just so that you can really get back to a place where you're approaching health. And I mean, that is such a real, and again, none of us saw this coming.
Yeah. I know it. Yeah. And I look back and it's just so crazy that like it blindsided so many people, like the majority. And I kind of think, I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about COVID and everything. It's like, the silver lining is I also see God's mercy in that he didn't lay out the plan of like, this is going to be 3 years.
Yeah, right. Thankfully.
Yeah, because I think we all would have been like, well, fine. I mean, I'm just going to sit at home. I'm going to, it's like, check out. So I'm grateful for that. And that just like with life, right? He gives it to us incrementally and in bite-sized pieces so we can handle it. Yes. But yeah, I think it's also giving somebody else the opportunity in your church to step up, like for somebody who needs a Sunday off. And I've found that just as a really refreshing, amazing thing, that it's like, okay, so I'm gonna set this rock down, or I'm gonna set this down for a little bit, because right now it feels like a rock and I need it to not feel like a burden, and see what happens. And it's amazing, how God is working behind the scenes and under the surface, and it gives other people an opportunity, I think, to step up. But what are some of the things that you see worship leaders could be doing to cultivate that before it happens? Like having somebody who can step up. I mean, sometimes it does just happen, but more often than not, there's been investment happening. So what are some of the things that, people can do to start that process?
That's so good. That's such a good point. If you're first of all, God's church is going to march on, whether you're, at the mic or on the keys or whatever, God's church is going to march on. And so if there are probably a couple of types of situation, like the leader I was talking to, this is like her first assignment, it's a church campus plant. She probably hasn't had that time to invest in anybody yet. And so she doesn't fall into this category, but there are some that I would say, if you don't have anybody who can step up, that's probably a reflection of a hole in your swing in terms of leadership. So who are you pouring into? And, if you're not pouring into people as a leader, you need to start. And so starting by identifying who on your team has the potential to, and again, you can be in the support side of helping them plan. I always make the analogy that there's a difference in baking a cake and eating a cake, right? Not everyone can eat a cake. I love to eat cake. Not everyone can bake a cake. You don't want me baking the cake, but I'm happy to eat the cake that you bake. So you might have some cake eaters, that you can say, okay, here's the plan. And here's how I developed it. Go lead this, and here's how I would lead it, invest in them, invest in them as people in the kingdom, and you never know. Down the road, maybe God taps them on the shoulder and calls them to their own place, in a really cool way. What a great image of passing that ministry baton, and so, I think look for and identify people on your team that can step up, that have the capacity to step up. And they may not be, like a finished product. Man, I'm not a finished product, and I've been doing it 28 years. I'm still learning all the time. And so, don't look for like this finished, polished person, but look for potential, look for heart and attitude. Those are so important. We tend to elevate talent, and it's not like talent is nothing. Talent is a piece of the pie, but it's just a piece. And attitude and heart are so important, man. That teachable spirit. Look for people on your team like that, and start pouring into them. And that way, like you said, you have options in place before burnout happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good, so good. I think it's because we just lean on that talent thing, but I have found, because like you said, it's got to be there. We can't have tone deaf and
right.
those kinds of things. But I mean, all that aside, it's like I have found, and I've said it to my husband over and over again, anytime I've mentored somebody or trained somebody, I'm like, they have that thing that you can't teach, they just are teachable and humble, and like they're just ready to learn and ready to grow. And that's where it starts. So I love that you said that. I just so wholeheartedly agree. And I think of the comment that I get a lot of the time, and I feel this too, is that it's really difficult to invest in other people as the worship leader because you have so much, going on a weekly basis. It's like not in your job description to develop people. And I think there's a little bit of like honesty needed there that like, yep, it is. It is hard work. It is going to take extra energy and time. And I don't know, have you felt that too? And do you hear that from people that it's like, I don't have time to do this.
Yeah. Where do I put this in the plan? That's the cup that's already overflowing, with stuff. And it doesn't have to be a big laborious process. It can just be time.
Yeah.
Come with me to rehearsal and stand beside me and watch what I'm doing. It's that old, I'm going to butcher this, but it's that old, like, you watch me do it. We do it together. I watch you do it, and then you do it on your own, or something like that. I mean, that can be the process. Maybe it's over a lunch, you have to eat.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't have to be, 18 hours every single week that you're going to spend. I will say I do some work with Slingshot Group, and I was at a church in Eagle, Idaho. And it was the first time I probably have ever seen this literally in job descriptions. And I think it was 30% of your time should be spent pouring into volunteers.
Wow. That's amazing. I love
Amazing that a church would have the foresight to do that, and to even require it. Like we believe in this so deeply, we're going to carve out a piece of your job assignment and say, take that, go be with your volunteers.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I love that.
That's amazing. That is amazing and so needed. And I think, I hope and pray that churches and worship leaders and leadership teams begin to realize that there's a big gap there. There's a big hole, and we're gonna have a problem pretty soon. Of really burnt out worship leaders and lots of holes to fill, and not very many people to fill them. So, this conversation has gone by so fast. It's been so good. Is there any closing comments or encouragement that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Man, I would say I am so grateful for what you do for the local church. I'm so grateful for what you're doing for the kingdom. Don't neglect your own personal, spiritual, physical, emotional, financial health. Don't neglect that. So many people in ministry will, sacrifice all of that, and they sacrifice family, and they do all of that kind of on the altar of for the Lord. And there's a balance there, but that's not what God is calling you to do. He's not calling you to sacrifice all of these things at the altar of ministry. There's a way to do it so that it all lives and works in balance together. And you have to find out what that looks like in your life.
Wow. Amen. That's so good. Well, Brian, thank you so much for being here today and just encouraging.
Pleasure. Love you guys. We really do.
Thank you. Yeah, we love you guys too. We're grateful for all that you do for worship leaders, and just through like a ton of encouragement and ministry. But then also there is that aspect of it that I'm like looking at the things that make me smile that you guys post, because it's real. You know what I mean? It's like it lifts our spirits, and I'm always like picking up my phone and my husband's like, look at this is so funny. Because it's true, And so like that's needed as well. Like we need to be able to laugh. So from that all the way to just the deep impact you guys are having on worship leaders. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrea. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to another episode. And I hope that you all just are encouraged and walk away with so much light in life after listening to this conversation today. And as always, reach out to us. Let us know how we can be praying for you, how we can help you and serve you. And we look forward to next time.
You've been listening to the Overflow Worship Podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please take a moment and leave us a 5-star rating and a written review, which helps us reach more people. New episodes are released every other Monday. So until next time, thank you for listening.